Hey friends, welcome back to another video. Today we are on day 3 of our 31 days of watercolor practice for World Watercolor Month. Let's jump in and get started. Welcome back, friends. Today we are on day 3, and today we are doing a technique that can be a little tricky. So this may feel a little on the boring side, but it's super necessary and something that you must practice. And that is creating a flat wash. Now, the reason why I say it's tricky is because, like I said, watercolor has a mind of its own, and sometimes adding more or less watercolor to the page and more or less water can give it different effects that we love to use in different paintings. But when we're trying to create a nice, smooth, flat wash across the page, it can get quite tricky if you don't have the proper water control or even supplies. Now, I recommended using this Paul Rubens sketchbook, which I love, but I will say it is hot press paper. And with that can come its challenges. So usually a cold press paper is toothier, it has more texture, and it allows the watercolor to seep into the paper a little bit easier, and it stays wet a little bit longer. When you're working on a paper that is a lot smoother, or it's not 100% cotton, it can be kind of difficult to get a nice smooth wash all the way across without streaks or watermarks or even blooms like this. But today I'm glad we're using this paper because while it may be a little bit more difficult to work on as opposed to a traditional really high quality cold press watercolor paper like Arches or Hahnemuhle, there are ways to get around it and create those nice flat washes with paper like this. It just takes a little bit more manipulation of your paints and water and a little bit more practice. So I use some washi tape to just tape out 2 different sections so we don't have to do the whole page at once. If you work on a larger area, it can be a little bit more difficult because the trick is to get the water distribution evenly across the whole page. You do not want areas that are drying faster than others. And if you work on a really large area, it's really hard to make sure that it's wet and it's distributed evenly across the whole page. So sometimes working smaller is really great practice and is a lot easier, especially if you're a beginner. The other thing you're going to need is some sort of larger brush to do this because you want to wet up the area a lot quicker with a larger brush. If you're using something smaller, like say my size 8, while we're wetting up this background, it's going to take longer. So that means that areas are going to start to dry, and that's when you get the unevenness with a flat wash. Okay. So for this, what I want you to do is grab your bigger brush. I'm going to try it with a flat wash brush as well as a size 12 round to show you the difference, but also that you can achieve it with both. So actually let's use the size 12 because this will be a little bit more difficult just because it's not as big as the flat wash. Okay, so to start, I like to wet up my paper because I find that really helps with water and pigment distribution. So I'm just going to use some water, kind of like we did for the wet on wet. And I'm just going to wet it up nice, not too wet where it's going to be dripping everywhere. If you notice there's puddles, just dry off your brush on your paper towel a little bit and then kind of just go back and forth. This is just going to help with the evenness of the wash. Now you're going to pick your color, whatever color you want. I don't even know what color this is. It's a blue. And what you're going to do is you're going to start at one end and you're just going to start going back and forth, bringing that color down. Now, naturally, it's going to start to lighten because we're going to start to lose pigment. For this, I want a flat wash of color all the way across. I want it to be the same value, meaning the same darkness or lightness over the whole area. I don't want a gradient. Gradients are what we're going to do tomorrow, which is another fun technique. But right now, I just want a flat wash of one color across the whole area. So I'm just moving my brush nice and softly across the paper to get a nice even wash. Now, pressure makes a huge difference with this. If you apply a lot of pressure, look what happens to the color. It actually lifts. So what you want to do is use light pressure, so you're not pressing too hard and you're just kind of dragging nicely across. If you are getting streaks, okay, let's say like this, where it's like uneven, darker streaks or lighter ones, it could be the pressure or it could be the amount of pigment that you were laying down on that area. So just really light pressure and try to go back and forth nice and evenly. I like to bring some of that down. You can even go left to right. Up and down. Just make sure it's all going one way across the whole area. And you should have a really nice flat wash. Again, light pressure is key. Now I am seeing a little bit of streakiness here. It should dry pretty well. But again, that could be the brush because it is a little bit smaller. It does give a little bit more streakiness. I'm using like the tiniest amount of pressure for this, just trying to get it all nice and even. There we go. That's a little bit better. But see how you get that really nice flat wash? It's when you have different amounts of water or paint that creates those uneven streaky bits or water droplets, those blooms. You just want it nice and even all the way across. Okay, this can be one of the most difficult techniques to do. Let's try it with our flat wash brush. I find it easier doing it with this. You are able to cover more ground easily. And I find it's a little bit easier to just be really soft with it and less streaky. So, like I said, wet up your paper first. You can do it without wetting up your paper, but I find having a good base of water really helps the colors to be softer and blend easier. Again, if it's pooling in one area, just tap your brush off and then go over the whole thing. Let's try purple. Okay, and I'm just going to start going over top. Now, when you go back into your color, see how I put it here? If you have too much water on your brush, that's when you're going to start creating these pools, and that's going to create unevenness. Do you see that? I'm starting to get those little marks here. This is already starting to dry. So you do need to work quickly. You do need to make sure you don't have a ton of water on your brush. So again, I'm just kind of tapping it on my paper towel, and I'm using really light pressure to go over the whole thing. I really want to make sure it is evenly wet as possible. You see how there's already less streakiness with this brush? I want to try and make it a bit darker. Okay, I'm just dabbing it into my watercolor. I'm not grabbing any more water. Too much water is going to create that unevenness. But also, if you go too much in your paint where it's too dark, it might be really hard to kind of make that even wash as well. So just keep that in mind, how much paint, how much water you have on your brush, and just keep going over the area. Now, like I said, using a smaller area to cover is going to be a lot easier than if, say, I were to cover the whole page. I feel like I could do the whole page because I've done this a million times, but if you're trying to cover a really large area, it can be kind of tricky. So just maybe make smaller squares for you to cover and practice this. Really light pressure, not a lot of water. Do not dip your brush into your water. I'm going to show you what happens if I go into my water and I start going over it again. You can immediately see it's being lifted here a little bit, and there's that unevenness. If this happens, don't panic. Don't think that you messed up. Dab your brush on your paper towel, and you're just going to move all that water that you just put onto your paper over the whole area. You just need to evenly distribute it over the whole area. And there you go. So let's let this dry. Let's make it a little bit darker over here and see how beautiful our flat washes appear without the tape. Okay, now that it's dry, I'm going to remove the tape. I'm just going to let you know why doing a technique like this is important. It may seem a little bit like, why would you want to create a flat wash when watercolor gives so many beautiful natural textures with, you know, wet on wet and water movement? This technique and this practice is really great for practicing water control. Like I've said in the past videos, water control is one of the most difficult things to master, and learning how to distribute water and pigment evenly across a whole surface is a really great practice and technique to master in watercolor. Also, you can create beautiful backgrounds. So learning this and mastering this is really important. And once it's completely dry, you can do a lot of other fun techniques over top. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's practice. Feel free, like I said, once it's dry, to do, you know, fun designs or patterns or, you know, more quotes or sayings. But I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you for tomorrow's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys tomorrow for day 4. Bye, guys.